A top Tory donor allegedly said in 2019 that Diane Abbott makes you want to hate all black women and that she needed to be shot. Cue massive backlash, media frenzy. Frank Hester, who was given the Tories 10 million quid in the last year, has said sorry for being rude. A statement from his company read, Frank Hester accepts that he was rude about Diane Abbott in a private meeting several years ago, but his criticism had nothing to do with her gender nor colour of skin. The Tories then sent out a procession of ministers and high-ranking officials to say the donor is not really a racist.
It's clear that what he said was inappropriate. He has, as I understand it, apologised for those remarks. I think the critical point here is I don't think what he was saying was a gender-based or a race-based comment, but it was clearly inappropriate. He has apologised, and I think we need to move on from that.
The Labour Party are in full swing, despite the fact that Diane Abbott had the Labour whip removed for denying racism against Jews, the Irish and travellers. Anyway, Labour are calling for the Tories to hand back the £10 million worth of donations from Frank Hester because they say he's a racist and that money is now tainted. But, as we know, the Tories were taking the view that this wasn't racism. Until, step forward, Kemi Badenoch, Qualities Minister Business Secretary, who said Hester's 2019 comments, as reported, were racist. I welcome his apology. Abbott and I disagree on a lot, but the idea of linking criticism of her to being a black woman is appalling. It's never acceptable to conflate someone's views with the colour of their skin. MPs have a difficult job balancing multiple interests, often under threats of intimidation, as we saw recently in Parliament. Some people make flippant comments without thinking of this context. This is why there needs to be space for forgiveness where there is contrition. And now, because he can't be outmanoeuvred, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has piped up, saying the comments allegedly made by Frank Hester were racist and wrong. But he accepts his apology and wants everyone to move on. But of course, he hasn't actually apologised for being racist, if indeed people think he was. He's apologised for being rude. And tonight, the Met Police have confirmed that they are assessing the alleged incident after the initial report appeared in The Guardian. Miss Abbott has not described Mr Hester's comments as racist or misogynistic, but said in a statement tonight, "It is frightening. I'm a single woman, and that makes me vulnerable anyway, but to hear someone talking like this is worrying. For all of my career as an MP, I have thought it important not to live in a bubble, but to mix and mingle with ordinary people. The fact that 2 MPs have been murdered in recent years makes talk like this all the more alarming." Well, Lee Anderson was booted out of the party recently for his Sadiq Khan comments, wasn't he? He said his language about Sadiq Khan and Islamists was clumsy, but he will not apologise. Well, it begs the question, doesn't it? If Lee Anderson gave 10 million quid to Rishi Sunak, would he still have a job? Rishi Sunak is happy to take the millions from a bloke who he thinks was racist, but would not back an MP who used clumsy language about Sadiq Khan. Interesting. But let's get the thoughts now of my panel. We've got GB News presenter Nana Akua, I've got Conservative Stoke-on-Trent North MP Jonathan Gullis, and author and broadcaster Amy Nickell-Turner. Nana, I'll start with you. You don't think this is racist, do you?
Well, look, he said something that out loud that a lot of people might think in their heads and aren't foolish enough to say out loud. But frankly, in my view, Diane Abbott is an embarrassment. I mean, remember in 2003 when she criticised private schools, then turns out she was sending a kid to one of them, and then she said West Indian mums will go to the wall for their kids. In 2012, she went on about and saying all cabbies were racist, and then a load of cabbies got really upset about that because that's simply a nonsense thing to say. In 2017, there was that car crash interview on LBC where she was the Shadow Home Secretary, and she couldn't work out how much it would cost for 10,000 extra police officers, and she went ranging between 300,000 to 80 million pounds. She is an embarrassment. And then finally she was suspended from the Labour Party for being racist. So because she said that Jewish people don't really experience racism. It's a bit like redheads, and it's more prejudice and stuff. And she did the letter in the Observer. So if all black women were like her, I would be embarrassed, frankly. So we're all different. I think where he's gone wrong is conflating behaviour with colour of skin, so people can deem that as racist. But to me personally, I wasn't offended because I just think Diane Abbott is a mess.
But that shouldn't come into it. Why is listing Diane Abbott's shortcomings relevant to this conversation? Let's take all that out of it and look at the comment in isolation. Look at the comment in isolation. It shouldn't be up for debate whether it's racist. It is so obvious. You are the only person in the whole country, I think, today. You must not have ears today to not be able to see this clear racism.
So you think that? I didn't say that. I didn't say that, and you're not listening. I think you just listen and hear what you want to hear. I said that when you conflate the colour of skin with someone's behaviour, then that can be seen as racist. So I totally get that people will see that. But he doesn't see it that way because he's talking about her behaviour.
But the fact that he doesn't see it that way, it makes it even more troubling.
There's a lot of
that he could say, "Oh, I didn't realise it was racism." It was victim blaming for her being both black and white.
One at a time, and then we'll bring Jonathan in eventually.
Take Black Lives Matter. I've got a very, very good friend of mine who said, and she's been the best friend of mine, she's taken care of me whenever I've needed it. She said that you can see why people would start to hate black people because of the behaviour of Black Lives Matter and because of what went on that. And I got what she was saying. She wasn't trying to be racist and said...
OK, but she wasn't trying, but she is being racist.
You don't even know what I'm going to say. She was not saying that she hates all black people. She was saying that behaviour, if it is representative of many black people, then that could be something that could make people dislike them. And I, as a black woman, know that if I do something, I could be seen as representative of black people. So I'm well aware that I have to look into how I behave.
But that's what's wrong, isn't it? Bringing sex or gender up and making it relevant in terms of in a derogatory way is racist and sexist.
Jonathan, do you think the Tories should hand back the £10 million?
Well, I think the comments were vulgar, and I think in the context in which we've had them brought to our attention, I would deem them to be racist, and I'm deeply uncomfortable with that. In terms of the money, at the end of the day, Mr Hester is a private individual who's entitled to choose what he wants to do with his own personal finances. If we were going to go on the logic that Jonathan Ashworth is pushing for, us returning £10 million, the Labour Party was literally found guilty of institutional anti-Semitism under an investigation from the EHRC. So, based on that logic, should the Labour Party not completely fold and pack up and go home, based on the fact that they've been found guilty, to have not taken the complaints or the allegations very seriously when anti-Semitism was rife within their own party ranks and targeting their own members of Parliament, including my predecessor, Ruth Smith, who was brutally attacked verbally in the inbox, and actually one person has since gone on to get a conviction. So, as I say, Mr Hester, what he does with his own money, that's up to him. Obviously, the decision to accept or not is above my pay grade, to be perfectly frank, Patrick. What I will say is the comments were vulgar. I do deem them to be racist in the context that we've seen them. But I think that...
Should other MPs not have come out and said that then earlier on? I think we saw Mel Stride... We did see Mel Stride earlier. Well, just before I go to...
What I would say is that Mr Hester's clearly a wealthy individual. He could clearly do something decent with his money, his extra money. He could go and speak to Diane Abbott and talk about maybe a charitable cause in her local constituency that he could give towards, which would actually transform the lives of maybe her constituents. That would be a positive outcome from what has been a very ugly scene.
Look, the bit about saying she should be shot and all that, that's just ridiculous. You wouldn't say that, and I really can't take him seriously for saying that. Well, I think he was just playing
and in the climate we're currently in, it's very dangerous.
But that was 5 years ago, so I'm not saying it's acceptable in any level, and I'm not saying that his comments weren't off. And these are the sort of things that people say and don't consider that they might be deemed as racist, because I've had plenty of people say ridiculous comments to me that are, in a sense, racist, but I know that they don't mean it that way. And so, as Kemi Badenoch said, there should be an energy for forgiveness to explain to him why some people would take what he said as racist. But I think the comments themselves...
But then that would stand.
Could I also... 5 years ago, so why are they
but he hasn't apologised.
OK, fine, but can I also just point out, Amy, as we heard earlier on, I mean, Diane Abbott hasn't actually called him a racist.
Diane Abbott hasn't called him a racist.
No,
but hang on a minute. Everybody else can see the racism for what it is.
But it was directed at her. Does that matter? I don't know.
Maybe she hasn't explicitly said that, but I'm sure she is well aware of racism, as she has suffered it throughout her career. She's the most abused female MP going. The point I want to make is he has an OBE, and I think that should be removed. I think the £10 million should be given. I think that the Tories were reluctant to call it racism because of this £10 million, because for the minute they call it for what it is.
It was just a silly comment.
He's also got previous on this.
see comments like this sort of thing
People
all
have to
the
be able
time.
to be forgiven.
There has to be an element of forgiveness. He's apologised, and he just needs to acknowledge that some people might see it as racist.
But on the one
I was
hand,
not offended by the comments.
But on the one hand, you often say we live in a post-racial society. Racism isn't really that big a deal anymore. In modern Britain,
I've never said any
you
of
have
those
said
words.
comments along those
You're
lines.
just making that up.
You have said comments along those lines. You've downplayed you've suggested that racism isn't much of a problem in the UK.
I didn't say
and
that at
you
all.
have said that.
I have not said that.
Okay, whatever.
Shall I tell you what I've said?
Yeah.
What I've said is that people... This is not a racist country, but there are individuals who are racist within it.
Well, hang on a minute. That's
my point.
So, go on. Do you think Britain is a racist country?
Well, clearly. Look at the examples. The examples that we've had in the last 2 weeks alone. What we've had from Lee Anderson.
You're telling me...
Let Amy talk.
But Nana, you are sitting next to me saying, oh, well, people say this stuff all the time. People say this stuff all the time.
Doesn't make them a racist.
We have problems with this. He needs to get to a point where he understands and has the contrition to... But he is...
Do you know what the problem with this is?
We do have a problem.
To infer that there's institutional racism in this country and that Britain is a racist country is so demeaning to people. It, by the way, pushes people to the fringes of extremism. In Stoke-on-Trent, we had 9 BNP councillors elected because at the time when it was just the Labour Party was the single party in power, there was nowhere else to go and protest. And the BNP disgustingly were able to use a platform and able to reach out to disenfranchised, particularly white working class individuals. I don't want that to be the case. I want people to say in the mainstream, and by just saying broad stroke that this is a racist country will just make people feel so isolated, make people so demeaned, and actually upset people who, the overwhelming majority of this country, the 99.9% of this country are not racist people.
Okay, so how come all these...
Nana, can I ask you a question? Does Amy, or people like Amy, who are white, have a right to tell you that this guy's comments were racist against black people and that Britain's a racist country?
We see, this is the thing. This is what often happens. I'm told what I should be, what I should find.
I'm not saying it.
I'm being told what is racist, yet if that's directed to me, I don't find that comment racist. But I understand why people will see it as racist, and I also understand what he was trying to get at. All we need to be able to do is speak to people, talk to him, explain why some people might see that as a racist comment, because that's when you get the undertones of racism, where people won't say things because they're scared of being racist, and then they will behave racist. So I'd rather he spoke and said those things so you can explain to him why some people might see what...
By the way, Patrick, very quickly, this deserved public humiliation will be, believe me, I'm sure for Mr Hester, a massive learning curve. Yeah. And I suspect he will never be daft enough or stupid enough to say anything like that again. And certainly for others out there who may think stupid things, I hope to God from this they learn to keep that in their head at the very worst case.
It's a clear demonstration of the covert racism that is in this country. But I just want to come back on you saying people like me, people like me. It's not people like me. The Met Police, a barrister has said that the comments fit the ingredients of stirring up racial hatred. It's not just me.
Well, that might be the case. That's stirring up racial hatred.
Diane Abbott's not actually reported.
But that was 5 years ago. And I wonder why it's coming out now. I'm not saying the comments are good comments. I'm saying that this is the sort of thing that people think and
by the way, with the Met Police, I wish they were proactive at calling out the racism against Jews on the streets every weekend that we're currently seeing.
Exactly.
They seem to be very quick to react to this, yet Diane Abbott's not made the legal complaint herself. So I can't understand how the Met's taking the case into their own hands, but they're allowing people to go on the streets calling for intifadas and calling for from the river to the sea, which means the decimation of the Jewish state and therefore the genocide of the Israeli people.
Well, yes, it does. It does to them, and that's what's important.
OK. All right. It's a lively start. Thank you very, very much.